Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for a BookTube discussion video, a topic that I sort of happened upon thinking about the books that we have bought for the channel and that we will be buying for the channel, and books that I want in my personal collection just to have them. And I realized I've got about 500 books. And I started to question how many books is enough. Heretical, I know. In fact, so heretical that I have talked a minimalist friend of mine, Zoila, I'm looking at you, out of getting rid of all of their books. And the way I did this was saying that books are not things, they are easy access to ideas. And I truly and wholeheartedly believe that is the place of the book. It is easy access to ideas. It is an entry point to the cognitive realm, if you will. So that's why I think that books are necessary, despite the fact that I'm something of a minimalist. So maybe a number, maybe it's not a number, not even 0 or above, nowhere in between, that is the answer. But there is certainly an answer for practicality. And for me, in the fact that I will probably be moving relatively frequently for the rest of my life. I don't know that I ever plan on being a homeowner. 500 books is probably right around that number, considering that it is the bulk of what I own. So what is the answer there? For practicality purposes, the number's probably around the heft of the books that I have, but there's still so many that I need. And I think that in order to start thinking about this, it might be necessary to break things down, to fragment things and look at them as parts as opposed to a whole, the whole of a collection. In looking at things that way, sort of as a portfolio, where am I to invest? But first, if 500 is probably the number with which I want to stick, or somewhere thereabouts, what do I get rid of first? Where do I trim the fat? Doubles, obviously. There are several books of which I own a duplicate copy, but also, perhaps, periodical type texts. I have many journals. Tin House, for example. I have several issues of Tin House. I don't think I want. They did not prove very fruitful for me. Unfortunately, there's nowhere really to give those away, nowhere to sell them. I would have to trash them. That feels dirty. Second, periodicals on the one step above that, perhaps. The Best American series, which have really turned to garbage, so much so that I didn't even pick up this year's Best American Short Stories, or last year's, I suppose, Best American Short Stories of 2018. The series has just turned to filth, just garbage, and it's not worth picking up, I don't think. Maybe I get rid of the back issues of that I have. Also, I am known to pick up things such as the writer's, what is it called? Writer's market for any given year. Past issues of that are probably pretty expired, especially considering the fact and the frequency with which so many journals and magazines go out of print, and the readiness of being able to find those things online. Next, things such as I pick up best stocks of 2019, things like that, just for reading, just to keep abreast of those things. Those are probably good to go ahead and do away with, despite the fact that I like to use them for research. It has been 8 years running that X stock has been subscribed. So obviously it's got a pretty good foothold on the market, in the market. After that, I'm not quite sure. Harry Potter, probably. Overlap? And what I mean by overlap is, for example, if I have 3 books on strategy, for example, which one or ones should I keep? Which one or ones were most useful? And that I think pretty much wraps up what I should get rid of, which is troubling. Also, maybe, I've got a lot of collections, collected short stories, collected poems. I suppose I could spend some time cross-referencing those to see which ones are actually obsolete, rendered obsolete by the rest of my collections. It would be an interesting but time-consuming practice, but maybe necessary. So, moving on, novels/plays. I actually own surprisingly few novels, fiction novels, for what I like to consider myself. That is troubling to me. Many of them I lost along the way. So many moves. I think I lost an entire box of books when I moved to St. Louis. I'm not sure where it went or where it would have gone besides flat across the highway, but I think it happened. That said, I would like to own Hemingway's canon and all of Shakespeare's plays. Bret Easton Ellis and T.C. Boyle are in strong consideration. William Faulkner is a must. But outside of that, I think mainly it would be one-offs. I have only read a single Nabokov novel, but it was so good that I'm considering making it a point to get through his canon. Shirley Jackson, I've read 2 of her novels. I'm not even sure how many novels Shirley Jackson wrote, but they were very good, and I need to figure that part out. Outside of that, I don't know what I would be doing there. Besides one-offs, there are not any series in which I am particularly invested outside of the Harry Potter thing that we do for the channel. The multi-decade writers of volume, such as Stephen King, I've never made much claim to. Michael Crichton, I certainly did when I was in middle school and high school, but outside of that, I don't really have any inkling of want for those larger canons, especially ones that are still growing, like Stephen King. But I don't know where to go besides that. Poetry collections, I've got the complete Emily Dickinson. I've got the complete Langston Hughes. I've got Shakespeare's sonnets. And I have enough compilations that I probably have, once again, the entire canon of required poetry readings somewhere therein. So I think with poetry, I'm mainly going to be focusing on entire collections of specific authors. One thing that I have noticed on Instagram recently is a lot of people seem to be posting Robert Frost collections for some reason. I'm not sure if his birthday was recently or if it's something that I'm just noticing because I realized that I do not have a complete Robert Frost. I'm not a big Robert Frost fan, but I think it might be necessary. William Blake might be necessary. What are some other poets that you know that their entire canon might be necessary? Especially with poets, it's nice because you can really get most of their work, all of their work. So for example, Emily Dickinson has 1,775 poems. That's all of it. That's all of it. Langston Hughes, the collected poems of Langston Hughes is a relatively, is a similarly sized book. So to have an entire collection of an author in such a compact volume is helpful. Which brings me to short stories. I have enough anthologies, again, that I've probably got most of the canon, if not most of the canon, twice. Still, I want the complete Flannery O'Connor. I'd like to have all of George Saunders, and I have but one Joyce Carol Oates, who is possibly more voluminous than is Stephen King, but through a different venture. I have all of Hemingway's short stories. I don't really know. I've got all of Langston Hughes' short stories. I don't really know any other complete works of short stories that I have. I don't know, and I would like your advice. Would that be the direction to go? Complete works of short stories. So, for example, Saunders has, I believe, 5 collections of short stories out. Would that be the direction to go? Or would it be to continue to compile just more and more recent, because I already have, like I say, probably the canon of required readings, but compile more and more recent examples of collected short stories, again, outside of the Best American series, because they're garbage. I wonder which is the route to go. Also, stopping and thinking about biographies. When I started thinking about it and looking around, I was shocked to realize, recognize, and notice that I have 5 biographies of 3 presidents. Those presidents being Truman, Lincoln, and Jackson. This is shocking to me because I'm not really all that interested in presidents. I think that this is a byproduct of a much younger me who had much less direction and was questioning much more heartily what greatness was, and thought that perhaps it was something that could subside within the office of president. It turns out it is not, at all. Nor is it any political office, I dare say, but those 3 were at least interesting people. So I am not ashamed, but, again, mightn't one Andrew Jackson biography be enough? Yes. Mightn't one Abraham Lincoln biography be enough? Possibly. And certainly the David McCullough Truman is probably the definitive book on Truman that has ever been written. So that is enough there. But I think I would like to concentrate more on artists in general. That said, I've got 3 Hemingway biographies, I believe. 2 for sure. And a Leonardo da Vinci biography, which I am looking forward to reading, as well as an Einstein biography, which I have read and very thoroughly enjoyed, which leads me to wanting to collect all of Walter Isaacson's work that I may digest it. But I think that artists in general would be a good direction to go. I'm not sure who else's biography would be interesting. There are people who are interesting figures in history, Winston Churchill, for example, but I think that Churchill, the individual, might not be as interesting as things that Churchill himself said, if that makes any sense. So I don't think I would really need a Churchill biography. If I am wrong, correct me in the comments section. But further back than that, much of biography is written as speculation, is written from historical documents. And I'm not sure how much of that I'd really like to get into. Would it be more interesting at that point simply to read the history? So I've started picking up books, for example, on Egypt. I like Egypt. I've always liked Egypt. I've always been interested in Egypt. Would it be more fruitful for me to read historical texts and mythologies of Egypt, or to read biographies of Egyptian pharaohs, for example? I'm not sure. And this is troubling when I'm trying to cull and cultivate a personal library. Do you have any strategies that you go to the bookstore with besides trying not to spend all your money? Do you think of things in this way? And if so, by what parameters? Because this is something that I'm not just putting this out there as my thoughts. I am really interested to know. Again, I told you I have 3 books on strategy itself. These are things in which I am interested. And this is something that in which I am truly interested in at the moment. I don't know from whence this disruption in my thought process sprang, this sudden questioning of, do I really need to be buying that book? I don't know where that comes from, but I'd like to have it resolved. And if you have any ways, any tips and tricks of getting me there, I'd like to know. And if you are a content creator, I would be interested in seeing your take on this discussion. I don't know if this is out there in BookTube already. I've never seen it. But it seems that there are 2 takes. There are the people in the BookTube-osphere who basically shame people for buying books, which I don't understand how you shame people for buying books, but you partake in this culture, etc. Anyway, and then there's the Steve Donahues of the world, who's never met a book he didn't like. At least never met a book he didn't like enough to invite home. So I think I stand somewhere in the middle. I am not the indulgent Donahue, nor am I a consumerism shamer in this regard. But this is something that I don't know. I wonder even how many people think about things in these terms. Books have been such a large part of my life for so long, and I've never stopped to think of it this way. I have at times stopped myself from buying books. I have at times told myself, hey buddy, your lease is up in 2 months. Do you really want to lug these around again? But I have never stopped and thought about things in strategic terms. What biographies do I need? Which biographies need I get rid of? Which novels do I still have to collect so that I have them? Which short story compilations do I need so that I can reference them? What poets can I not quote? What poets do I need to expand my knowledge of? And that's not even breaching the subject of strict nonfiction, non-biography. For example, Robert Greene writes some really interesting stuff. If I'm going to collect any of one writer, Robert Greene's probably up there, right? In order to live a fulfilled life for someone who is a strategic thinker, but also someone who is very motivated and driven towards things. Robert Greene's someone you might want to pick up. And that's not, history, philosophy. I like to collect certain works of atheistic writing. Christopher Hitchens, Dan Dennett, Sam Harris. It's not to say anything of those. What about compilations of essays? What about informative? So one thing I'm working on right now, Robert Pinsky, The Sounds of Poetry, A Brief Guide. The sections I've just broken down leave nothing for this. And when you think about things numerically, if 500 books is probably about all I need at any given time until I buy a building to store my books, what numbers does that break down into when you think about things, the mortality, if you will, of things, the terminal nature of those spots? How many novels do I get? Well, if I have X number of spots for novels and 12 of them or whatever are Hemingway, say I've got space for 100 novels and 12 of them are Hemingway, I've got 88 spots left. Then things break down very quickly in a terminal nature. I think the answer is to find a building in which to store my books. make it a private library and charge people owner or memberships. I think that's really the answer we're looking for. How many people would pay Donahue for access to that, what does he call it? Hyde Cottage or something? I don't know what he calls it. How many people would pay for access to his personal library? I'm not there, and I fear I will never get there if I'm always telling myself, do you really want to be lugging all of these books all around? So I think it's something interesting to think about. Not that it needs an answer an immediate answer for me anyway. But it is interesting to me. I'm running out of space. I've got 2 bookshelves, kind of like this, and then I've got books piled up all along what is the divider between my living room and my bedroom as I live in a studio. So I think it's an interesting question. And if you have any responses, I would love to see your videos or hear from you in the comments below.